Hey guys, welcome into the Bear With Us podcast. I'm Jack. He's Frank. Frank, I feel like we've done this podcast about 700 times, this
Yeah.
specific thing that we're about to talk about here. Bears lose to the Texans on Sunday Night Football. The score of 19-13, Texans over the Bears. Bears are 1-1. And, honestly, Frank, we didn't do our typical, season prediction podcast, but if we had, and we were kind of going over the schedule, you and I for sure would have had this game as a loss. I think we both have them beating the Titans, and kind of as the season goes on, I think, we can maybe preview that a little bit more. But I see a lot of people talking about the Bears were supposed to lose this game. Everybody thought they'd lose, and it's just like, yes, that's true. Like, I had this as a loss, you had this as a loss going into it, or going into the season, I should say. But it's just not the way I thought they would lose, and I think that's where I'm feeling down. I'm feeling blue because Caleb Williams' second debut, his second game, just not good enough. So before we get into that, Frank, how do you feel about just overall the Bears losing to the Texans on Sunday night? Now, obviously, we'll break it down and we'll get into the details of the loss, but I'm just curious how you're feeling. Are you off the deep end? Is it over? Is the season done? Like I've seen a lot of Bears fans basically saying.
No, I feel the same exact way that you do. Going into this year, that was one of the episodes me and Nas did in the offseason. We didn't take a super deep dive, but we were just sort of looking at the schedule and what worries me. And this was one of the two games in the first, I think it was 9 games before the division games start, that I was like, okay, that one's probably going to be a loss. That's going to be tough with everything working against us and all the continuity happening with Houston. So from that standpoint, I'm not shaken at all. I feel like there were leaving the game though, and I guess this is where we can segue into breaking things down. I leave a little more encouraged than anything else because again, this is 2 straight weeks where the Bears made almost every mistake that you could offensively, and not so much defensively. A couple of third and longs that you would hope that they wouldn't convert, and they're still in these games at the end of it, and they won in week 1 without having an offensive touchdown. So again, we're looking at this right now as if this is the bottom, because make no mistake, there was progress from week 1 to week 2 with this offense, because it just couldn't get any worse than week 1. It absolutely could not, unless you're Bryce Young and the Panthers. But you know what I mean? So I'm still seeing remnants of things that leave me encouraged, not only for this year, but then especially long term with Caleb Williams.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be throughout the season, throughout these podcasts. I think that's just going to be where we start every single time, because much like Mitch, much like Justin, that is where the success is going to come from. Now, you can argue with that, and you can say, well, listen, Bears made it, made it to the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman, and that's true. Not when he was a rookie, but just not a very good quarterback. And that's true. You can win a Super Bowl, I think, with this Bears defense, because let me tell you, if you would have told me at the beginning of the season, even going into Sunday night, that the Bears would hold the Texans to 19 points, that Texans offense that is so good, to 19 points, I would have told you the Bears are winning easy. And I would have been thrilled about that. And it's 2 straight weeks where the Bears defense looks as good as advertised. And honestly, a lot of questions. I know we didn't want to talk about the defense too much, but just overall, I think the pass rush issue is kind of been fine. Like, the D line is not a problem to me.
Yep.
Like, I've been very happy with the pressure that they've been able to get, the sacks they were able to get on Stroud. Linebacker plays is good. Corners solid. Stevenson, had a little bit rougher of a game, but this defense is good enough to win you at least a playoff game. And I think that's where it's frustrating, especially with Caleb Williams' second game, because, and we talked about this going into the season. This will not be normal for a rookie quarterback drafted first overall. He's going to a team that is ready to win now. Like, they are ready to go. So there isn't going to be that grace period that most rookie quarterbacks do get. You think of like Bo Nix right now, who's just not playing well, but nobody's jumping off the cliff or anything on Bo Nix, like, because the Broncos weren't expected to be good. So Caleb is he's expected to be advanced. He's expected to be doing what Stroud did last year for Houston. It's just not the same situation.
But let me pause you right there, Jack, because this is one of my points as it relates to comparisons to other rookies who had really good years. Because that has been the more common one, is that, well, CJ Stroud had a really good year last year, and Caleb, who's the better prospect of the two, not necessarily the better quarterback literally right now, but coming out of college, if they were both in the same year, Caleb goes over him. It is what it is. But Stroud had games that looked like week 1. He had a game where he threw for 91 yards. He had another game where he threw for $150. Like, he was still a rookie. So people are taking these two games and almost extrapolating that amongst, across 17 and be like, well, this is what it would be. We've got 15 more games, brother. And I'm not saying you're saying this. I'm just saying, and I mean, there's other stats. I have the tweets, I believe, but like Stroud only threw, I want to say it was like 7 touchdowns through 9 games. The offense was averaging like 11.5 points per game, and the defense was like, quarterbacks generally get off to a slow start in year 1, even if they wind up having a really good year. The only two that, off the top of my head anyway, I'd have to do some deep digging, that did not was Andrew Luck and Justin Herbert when he finally came in week 2 or 3, whatever it was, and he just came out the gate firing. You generally do not see that. Like, it just, like, people who are having these grand proclamations right now, it's exhausting to me. Because there is going to become a time this season where Caleb Williams throws for 300 yards, potentially even 400 yards. They just need to totally change tunes and be like, oh, he's the franchise guy. Like, let's have a full season's worth of work before you start having the grand proclamations. Now, we will get to this particular podcast and other episodes, critiques and things we want to see him get better at or do better or do more of. But can we stop? And I'm not saying you, it's the general you. But can we stop with the grand stuff? It's 2 games. That portion of Bears Twitter right now is really irking me.
So here's the problem, and I'm with you, because I've been saying it in any fantasy chat that I'm in, Dynasty. People are trading left and right. It's like, dude, it's been 2 games. Pump the brakes. And that's the same thing with the Bears. It's been 2 games. Like, the problem though, Frank, Bears specific problem, and it's not fair. I'm not even going to suggest that it's maybe up for debate. It's completely unfair. But the reality is that for Bears fans, they've seen this. They've seen this year after year after year after year since Jay Cutler. A terrible offensive line that cannot block, that cannot buy time, a rookie quarterback just struggling. Deep ball accuracy is an issue. Receivers not being on the same page. Defense is really fucking good and keeps them in games. Like, it would almost be better if this Caleb team was paired with like that 2014 defense where you're just like, fuck, we have no chance. They're gonna score 45 points on us. It is what it is. Let's get this offense figured out. But it's because this Bears team is so similar to everything that has come before, it's hard not to blow it up. Like, in the under the microscope, yes, it is 2 games into the 2024 season, but you're also piling that on with all the baggage that comes from Trubisky, that comes from Justin Fields.
Sure.
Especially with Justin being 2-0 in Pittsburgh and people just assuming that he's playing well, even though are they not watching?
They must not be. No, they must not be.
He's not throwing 300 yards.
And you know what, though? I feel like even for us as podcasters, content creators, whatever anyone wants to, label us, there's some static and like noise to ignore, because I feel like a lot of similar conversations happened in 2015 with the Cubs at the All-Star break. They're like 500 and they're like, oh, this is all blow. Like, Joe Madden fucking sucks, and like these guys, John Lester wasn't worth it, and then they come out and have the most incredible second half of the year, make it to the NLCS, and you're like, okay, this was the team we thought they could be. All that to say is this is classic Chicago panic. So I get that there are some parallels, but just pump the brakes, because they were doing the same exact thing with the Cubs before they won their ring, and then continued to have sustained success for years to come after that. Like things, I think people want to make, they want that to be a thing a little bit too much sometimes, where it's like they're expecting the change to be so quick, and that's just, when has that ever happened? I mean, because I almost feel like you could be a Chargers fan and say the same thing. Well, look, we got this guy throwing for 4,000 yards every year, but we had Phillip Rivers doing the same thing, and we never won shit. And he's still so early in his career. That was a random example. It was the first thing that came off the top of my head. But do you get what I'm saying? Like, if you really search for things, you're going to find stuff like that throughout the history. And again, it may wind up being that way. I just think having that opinion after 2 games is asinine.
I think it's also just an overall state of Chicago sports in general.
Yes.
And again, none of this is fair to Caleb, and none of it is fair to this Bears offense. That being said, though, I do think we should make it clear, once again, because we did it last week, and I want to do it again this week. I'm not happy with the Bears offense. I'm not just going to give out free passes to Caleb Williams. Well, it's just his second start. No. It is his second start, and therefore he should be allowed some grace, but that doesn't mean he didn't play bad. He didn't have a bad game.
Yep.
I'm not happy with 23 completions out of 37 attempts for 174 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. I'm not happy with that. That's not good enough, and it wasn't good enough to win the game again. Realistically, this team could be 0-2, and it would be on the offense for not being able to score points. They got their first touchdown, a rushing touchdown by Khalil Herbert, but like, all right, let's keep it tight on Caleb for a second here, because I do want to talk through some of the performance right out of the gate. That opening drive for the offense, I was happy, man. Like, it looked just, you could, after what was it, 4 or 5 passes, you couldn't tell me anything. That looked infinitely better.
Yep.
Than the first week. He was deliberate. He was stepping into throws. He was on time. He was accurate. All of that was there. He was reading the field well. All of that was there. But then D'Amico Ryans, who I don't think gets enough credit in this league still somehow for being as good as he is as a play caller, especially on defense. As soon as that pressure kicked up, man, Caleb was struggling, and that interior, something's got to change. And we'll get to the O-line, but specifically on Caleb, how do you feel he handled that pressure? Were there any concerns that you had throughout the game with Caleb in general? Obviously, the stat line not being amazing.
Yeah, so specifically as it pertains to the pressure, it's honestly hard for me to say right now, because I don't think he's like seeing ghosts or running into sacks. The O-line just is that bad. So like that portion, because that was one of the bigger things as to why the Bears moved on from Justin, was because he did a lot. He held the ball a lot. His pocket presence really wasn't there. Caleb still, he has those things that, quarterbacks of the past have not. But the one thing that I saw is what you alluded to, is that quick game is starting to become on point. Those quick, they were doing the timer thing as well, of like, oh, it's under 2.5. That's damn near there already with this offense, which is phenomenal. Now, the issue lies, and this is where we sort of have to separate a few different things. If I have one major worry right now with Caleb, because there aren't very many, honestly, this may be the only one as it stands, outside of injury, because he's getting fucking hit a ton. His deep ball has got to get better. He's either totally sailing it or underthrowing it to a point where the only person that can make a play on it is the defensive back. So that has to get cleaned up and fast. That's my major worry after 2 games with him. But when he has a chance to step into his throws and reset his feet, he's putting it on the money from 15 yards in. Like that to me is already there. But yeah, it's I mean, I guess just to like roundabout way to answer your question, the pressure part is so hard for me to put on him right now, because again, he's not bringing any of it onto himself. He's not extending plays when he doesn't have to. He's not like missing open receivers and then panicking like Justin used to, or just like not seeing the field at all like Mitch used to. It's just like the O-line is so bad that it's like, I don't know who could have done anything different in some of these scenarios where he's getting, because even times where he broke 3 fucking tackles in the backfield and the 4th guy gets to him. Like, how many guys are pressuring him on this one play? It's ridiculous.
Right. Well, and I can't find it right now, but I saw that Caleb Williams has like the fastest, like one of the fastest release
It's fourth
times
in
in
the
the
league.
NFL.
It's fourth in the league
And
through 2 weeks. Yeah.
so that is, I think that is a positive sign, because one of the biggest critiques that Bears fans had in general with Justin was that he was holding the ball too long. That's not necessarily the case with Caleb. He's getting the ball out. It's just that accuracy, that timing isn't quite there. And I'm wondering if that's a part of that has to do with Shane Waldron's his offense, his system. How many of these routes are option routes?
Right.
Because if they're option routes, like you saw it at the end of the game with DJ Moore, DJ keeps going, I'm sorry, Rome
Yep.
Odunze, he
Yep.
keeps going. Caleb threw it to a spot, and you're like, what the? That wasn't even fucking close. Like, what's going on here? To me, that's because you're giving that receiver the option. Caleb and that receiver have to be on the same page to know what to do. Should Rome come back? Should he keep going? Caleb thinks come back to the ball. Rome thinks I'm going to keep going. To me, that's just a chemistry thing.
Right.
And that's going to take some time. Caleb's never thrown to any of these guys before. And there were still some balls that that Caleb was throwing that were just fucking dimes. And you see the talent. The deep ball stuff, it's so hard, and I hate that we continuously have to continue adding this context, adding this level of context, because we've been doing it since 2018 with Mitch. But it's just it is part of it. Those 15+ yard balls are going to be harder to complete when your interior of the offensive line is just getting absolutely destroyed and guys are in your face before the routes have time to develop. And so I think I'm thinking of one play specifically where Caleb steps up to the left, he throws it to DJ, the ball is like just a little bit off, and DJ was pissed about it. He was visibly frustrated.
Yep.
Where it's like, I think Caleb sped up and didn't quite step into the throw the way we know he can, because he was worried about the pressure. And that's where the concern comes in for me, Frank, because that 9-sack game in Cleveland that happened to Justin Fields in his first start, I feel like that impacted a lot of his development in terms of holding the ball, in terms of just being more frantic and not staying in the pocket, where Caleb is like, he's taking those hits, but he is not running with the football as much as I'm almost like, run, like go, take the yards where you can get them. I think it's just a timing thing. I'm not super concerned. It hasn't looked good, but I'm not concerned. I'm really not. We've seen it on tape. He didn't just magically lose his deep ball accuracy. I think it's just gonna take some time. I do.
It will. And to your first point, that was what I was talking about last week. I can live with that early on in the year when guys just aren't on the same page. What I can't live with is the ball placement of week one and how poor these deep balls have been. If that is, consistent throughout this year, we're going to have issues. I don't think it's going to be that way. And to your grander point, the reps in, the getting used to this offense, and really just getting used to your guys, knowing where they like it, knowing what they like, so sort of knowing what we both see. Because on these option routes, and when you're throwing it to a spot, if I'm the quarterback and you're the receiver, and we take a little gander at each other, and I look at you, and we both have to be thinking the same exact thing. If I see cover two, I need you to see cover two. But if you see cover three, or you see something there, you see man, that whole thing's going to be off, because it's about timing and rhythm there. I believe that portion of the offense will come along. I guess really we can end the Caleb portion with, we ended it last week with a grade, and I think we both gave it an F. Honestly, this is saying a lot, but like, if you take away the 2 picks, the grade would be higher. But to me, this one was probably like a D, because it was an improvement from last week. The short stuff was there, the intermediate stuff was there. His ability to evade pressure, keep his eyes downfield. You see some of these things that still leave you very encouraged. Those picks were really bad. That triple coverage, roll into your right, you just throw that one away. You just throw that. I mean, it was more of a decision making thing than anything else. And then obviously, going back to the deep ball stuff, I just got you got to give your guys at least a chance to make plays on these things.
Yeah, I think a D is fair. I think it's more than fair. That triple coverage one, that's That's so rookie. That's just
Oh yes.
so rookie.
Oh yeah.
Same with the other one, the other pick where he threw it. Where did he throw it? He threw it late and across his body over
Yep.
the entire field. I mean, and it was a great interception. Let's not get it twisted. That was a great pick. He almost had another one. Probably should have had 3, to be honest with you. But yeah, it looked. There were some things that he did better. I love, and it should not be taken away from him at all. I love the toughness that he showed because he was getting absolutely killed in that pocket throughout the entire game, and he just kept coming back, kept throwing the ball. I don't know. I think D is perfectly fair. Frank, I touched on it a little bit, but I think we can kind of mold this into one. The offensive line and the run game. We talked about it last week where just everybody had such high expectations for Caleb, and that's totally understandable. But it wasn't just him that had a bad game last week. It was everybody. It was the entire offense. You can't expect a rookie quarterback to have to do everything by himself, and that sentiment carries over to this week as well. Zero run game.
Yep.
I mean, DeAndre Swift, 14 carries for 18 yards. And outside of that, like Caleb had the highest rushing total of 44. Like, and the offensive line, I mean, you just watch the game. There was nothing there running wise. Everything was horizontal. It just, you have to be able to establish some type of run game. And DeAndre Swift is not a 14 carries for 18 yards player. He is a much better player than that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was frustrating because when they would go downhill, they would get like 7 yards a carry, and then they would back off and go back into shotgun. And I guess we can maybe even bring the Waldron top.
I was going to say, this is sort of 3 for 1 here. Yeah.
Let's just knock them all out. How do you, I mean, I kind of am leading the witness a little bit here, Frank, but
No.
But how are you feeling about the run game, the offensive line, the play calling so far, 2 games in?
It wouldn't shock me if we have similar thoughts. Based on what we've texted so far, I do think you're going to dislike Waldron a little more than me at this point, if not a lot more than me at this point. I know some of the calls have been frustrating. I'll start with him. My biggest issue with him right now is I need him to ditch the shotgun runs. Because to your point, under center runs have looked better. Even with the porous offensive line, you're still giving them a chance to assert themselves and move forward. Shotgun runs are just totally different. A lot of, especially former Bears, Olin Kreutz is one of them. I forget who, maybe it was Lance Briggs. This was a couple years ago. He was talking about it. The shotgun runs aren't the same. It's just not the same thing. That has to go. Particularly those shotgun sweep runs. They have gone nowhere. Just please stop doing that. That's totally on him. As it pertains to the rest of his play calling, though, I feel like there are quite a few positions in the NFL on offense that you can hide if you're a good to above average to good play caller. And if I'm being honest with you, I think quarterback is easier to hide than an offensive line is. So what we're seeing in real time is Shane Waldron trying to hide his offensive line. He's trying to work around them actively, and that's why a lot of the short stuff happens. That's why a lot of the horizontal stuff happens. And make no mistake, when we're talking about upgrading at the quarterback position, the reason why we get positive yardage a good amount on these horizontal stuff is because Caleb is so good at getting the ball out quick. So that portion of the game, maybe I don't want it as much, but that can't go away because it has been successful. The screens have been solid for the most part. The horizontal stuff has worked. But then, like, if you're Shane Waldron, how do you build off of that? Because when he is drawing up plays, Caleb's getting pressured like 70% of the time when he's holding the ball past 2.5 seconds. Eventually you have to hold the ball a little bit. You can't make deep throws on 2.5, so no one gets downfield that quick. Like, something has to give here. And to that, I really don't know what else to say about the offensive line. They're horrible. I guess we'll get to like maybe personnel changes in a little bit, but as it pertains to these 2 games, I don't know what the right word is. It's not empathy. I guess I feel Shane Waldron to a large degree.
Sympathize.
I sympathize with him because he is trying to hide an offensive line that is really bad. He had nothing to do with creating this offensive line. They are what they are right now. So I see what he's trying to do. The horizontal stuff, the quick plays, but there are other times where, it's like I move the pocket a little bit, do some play action fake, do some rollouts, do some boots, make certain plays where you're taking advantage of Caleb's legs. Give him one option on a boot, and if it's not there, you're either running or throwing the ball away. That's also an answer to hide the offensive line. So that's a lot of what I want to see moving forward. And I feel like, to your point where Bears fans are like, we've said this before. If you've listened to us, we've said this about Justin. We've said this about Mitch. And I totally get it. But I will say, even from a game plan standpoint, I did see different things from Waldron from week 1 to week 2. That shows me he's trying things. He's almost seeing like, what can stick? What can we do here? And the offense did have a better game. It wasn't a good game, but it was better from week 1 to week 2. So I don't think I'm like not hitting the panic button on Waldron whatsoever. Again, am I like impressed? Am I happy about what I'm seeing? No, I'm not. But to your point with Caleb about him throwing to guys for the first time, Waldron's also calling plays for these guys for the first time and getting a feel for what all they can do and can't do within this offense. I think, outside of the shotgun stuff and the shotgun runs and the pitches and things, I think my really only big thing that I'm negative about him right now is get Gerald Everett. He can't be a focal point of your offense, dude. I get you wanted him here to, be I don't want to say a staple, but just he's been in your offense before. He knows how to run it. He can help along, but he cannot get more targets and more touches and more reps than Cole Kmet. He's not a better anything. He's not a better blocker. He's not a better receiver than Cole Kmet. That's one portion that's making me go crazy.
So what you just said is, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit in the sense of maybe I'm being a little bit harsher on Shane Waldron than you are at this point, which is, it's totally fair. It's just concerns yep. that I had last year about Getsy that have carried over, which is, it's not fair because they're two completely different play callers. But a couple things. One thing specifically, and I always think of you because of it. When the Bears hired Shane Waldron, I saw a lot of Seahawks fans being like, good luck. And then you kind of start thinking about like, okay, Jackson Smith-Njigba, he didn't really have a big year. Like, he was supposed to be really good. Like, what's that about? Could he not juggle 3 receivers? Kind of similar situation in Chicago with obviously the big 3, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome. Starts to be like, okay, is there something there? And then it just in the back of my mind, I remember you always telling me that story of a friend that you had who's a Raiders fan. And when we traded for Khalil Mack, you were like, oh, hell yeah. Like, what do you think about that? And he was like, good luck. And you're like, whoa, what are you talking about? And then you just saw it like throughout every season with the Bears. Like there were just some things there that you were like, I don't know. My thing with Waldron is like, it's 2 games in a row where I'm just like questioning the personnel decisions, and I'm just not happy. I'm just not happy with it. And again, you're right. Maybe he's going to Gerald Everett a little bit more because he knows Gerald Everett. He's familiar with him. He knows what he can do, and he's just not comfortable with Cole Kmet quite yet. Now, obviously, in the second half, things changed. Cole Kmet became a much bigger part of the offense, which absolutely needs to carry over. But why is Roschon Johnson not playing? I really need that to be answered. Like, I'm not saying Roschon is like, even last year, it's not like he was this amazing player, but you can't tell me that he is not a better running back than Travis Homer. You can't tell me that. Why not chip those really good edge rushers that the Texans have? But he did at the beginning of the game. The first play, he had Everett and he had Swift. They both go out and chip, and Caleb was able to make a nice throw. But then he goes away from it. But he keeps going back to the things that we don't like, the swing out screens, the swing passes, the shotgun running, like things that clearly are not working, and you're not seeing those adjustments. That's where I get frustrated, where it's just like, I understand you don't have time to throw, but you need to do something different. Like,
yep.
We saw the third down slant pass that worked great, and then it just disappears. Like, it's frustrating because it feels so much like, okay, here's the scripted plays right out of the start of the game. Here's why, like, it looks good. Things are working. Caleb is deliberate. And then once you get past those scripted plays, once the game actually starts, that's when we see those lack of adjustments. And it's just like, I just, he's not making me feel good. Let's just leave it at that. It hasn't been good. And that's not just on him. It's on execution. It's on the entire offense.
No, 100%. And again, where I land right now, and this could change after some games, but I just don't know. Outside of, again, moving the pocket a little bit more, doing some play action fake. I mean, really only handing the ball off out when Caleb's under center and not in shotgun. I think those are really simple things to implement. But even if that doesn't work, I don't know what else you can do. This offensive line is that bad. So to your point with personnel stuff, I agree with you. But Jack, I mean, I hate to break it to anyone or to everyone else who sees that, the personnel thing has been an issue since Eberflus has been here. We've been complaining about that. So to me, that's more of an Eberflus thing than a Waldron just come in here and just start doing that on his own. This has been a weird fucking thing since year one, rotating Tevin Jenkins and like other right guard stuff and just like weird personnel decisions. And I'm sure I could think of more, but I'm going off the top of my head with that. But I know over the last 3 years, there's been a ton of things as it pertains to this team with personnel that we're like, what the fuck is happening with that? So it's not to absolve Shane Waldron. I'm sure he has some input there, but the buck has to stop with Eberflus because he's been the consistent one here. He's been the guy here with this regime. So all that to say, my only point with the offensive line, because there's nothing to break down. They're bad. They can't recognize stunts. Anytime there's a stunt, these guards are lost. Like I don't know what is being coached to them and who's at fault there. If it's Waldron, if it's Chris Morgan, or if it's Eberflus, or if it's a mix of all of them, something is inherently wrong there. But there's also a thing where even when there aren't stunts, you're still seeing Shelton get fucking blasted. You're seeing Tev, who I think he just has to move back to right guard. Because Nate Davis is garbage. He doesn't look good on the left side. I think that would upgrade this line to at least some degree. But that's my larger point here. I said this in week one. Maybe we give this same exact line another go. It did not look any better. There has to be personnel changes. They drafted the kid from the Chicagoland area in the third round, Amagaji, I forget his name. Try him. Yeah. Try something. You have to just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. Nothing is working with this offensive line to a point where, I mean, why do I always forget our right guards? Darnell Wright has looked awful. And that may be, it's something that Olin Kreutz talked about a little bit last year when he was talking about the future of the offensive line, but he brought it up again yesterday. I think Tev not being there on the right side is detrimental to this offensive line. It's particularly Darnell Wright. He did not look this bad ever last year. And now all of a sudden him and Tev can't block. Something's wrong here.
Yeah, and so I think those are two things that I think we could kind of wrap this podcast up on for this week. I want to talk Matt Eberflus just in general because there were very questionable decisions.
Yep.
And I want to talk about O-line fixes. So let's start with the O-line because we're already kind of right there. And you already threw out some possibilities as well. Matt Pryor has some right guard experience. He started, for the Colts last year. That's a potential option. I think I don't. Is there any way that you see this offensive line being the same heading into week 3? Basically, because one of the things that a lot of former offensive line talk about, especially Olin Kreutz, is the need to gel, is the need to have this offensive line gel. And one thing to remember, Nate Davis did not do anything in training camp. He really wasn't present.
Yeah.
To the point where Eberflus was sort of calling him out. And you see it with the tapping, with Nate Davis tapping Shelton to snap the ball. That didn't look right. The amount of false starts, I think, was the most since Eberflus had taken over. Like, there was a lot, and we haven't really seen, like, say what you want about the offense, but the mistakes especially with like false starts and stuff, like, we don't really see that a whole lot. So for this offensive line to take seemingly a step back when most of these guys are the same outside of the center, that's concerning. Like, that is really, really concerning. And Braxton did not look good. I'm with you. What I think they could potentially do, maybe you go Amagaji at left tackle. That's what he was drafted for. Maybe kick Braxton in to left guard and then shoot Tev over to right guard.
Listen, we can play with combinations because we're on the same page here. I don't care what it is. They literally have to try anything. They have to try something. I mean, because like you talked about gelled, I agree with you. And then my retort would be if me and Eberflus sat down and he explained to me, this is why we're going with this again in week 3. This is little old me talking, like, who the fuck am I? I'm no expert. But I would say if you're talking about continuity, but like my retort would be, if you're talking about continuity, then why did you put Tevin Jenkins at left guard? You just totally ruined that continuity from a year ago between Darnell Wright and Tevin Jenkins. And it has not looked good. So you can't give me that argument that, oh, at 2 weeks, we got to stick with it. That was a whole year when Tev was healthy. Like, that sort of falls on its face.
And why were you not using the preseason to get them to gel?
Yeah. So listen, offensive line for me, again, bad, F grade, literally try anything. If that means what you just said, if that means kicking Braxton inside and Amagaji comes up, or maybe it's just literally just putting in Bill Murray for Nate Davis, Doug Kramer. So I don't care. You have to try something. It's putrid, because again, I'm seeing the bones of something with the short game. I'm seeing a little something with the quick release and the this and the timer, and that all starting to come along. But again, if you're Shane Waldron, how do you build on that outside of, again, rolling the pocket and moving and trying to extend the play a little bit more? But like, you can't always rely on that. You need to have some protection. It just has to happen. Like, yeah, he's not allowed to get to read 2 or 3 half of these pressures. Like, it's ridiculous, but it's almost the only working theory that I have right now, and we don't have to go in too deep here, but they talked about like not being fooled by certain things in year 1 and blah, blah, blah. And they may have been a little bit fooled because the one thing you could never take away from Justin Fields was that magic that he had in the pocket and breaking tackles and things. So some of those stats maybe looked a little bit better because he literally wasn't getting sacked, because he was getting out of things when the offensive line would break down over these last couple of years. Did they fall for a little bit of that and say, like, you know what, it's not that bad? Or did they almost like twofold it and say, you know what, Justin did have that, maybe Caleb doesn't, but what Caleb does have is the ability to his pre-snap reads are better, his ability to get through reads is better, his release is faster. So maybe we just throw this together again and that fixes it. They had to have gotten fooled somewhere with this, because they have just not addressed it over the last year and a half.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that, because last night during the game there was one play where Caleb, it was like his jersey. It's when his jersey got pulled and he threw that pick into triple coverage. When his jersey's getting pulled and he escaped, and you're like, all right, here we go. I literally forgot that it wasn't Justin for a second.
Yeah,
and when he didn't just take off, I'm like, oh, here we go, 40-yard rushing game, we're right back. And then he like threw. I'm like, shit. Okay, all right. That was the moment of the game where if former Justin, if people who wanted to keep Justin around were upset, I can give them some grace on that one. So I was like, damn, all right.
That's funny.
Right. But no, I agree with you. I do think that Justin did mask a lot of the offensive line's issues, and something we didn't really touch on for Caleb specifically. You touched on deep ball concerns. He did not feel pressure very well. There were a few times where Will Anderson's coming on his back, and again, it's week 2. It's gonna take some time, but a couple times where I was like, dude, like you gotta know when that's coming. So,
but there was, I get what you're saying, but like I kind of don't at the same time, because the times where you would, I don't know, it's tough, man, because he was still in his drop back at that point, looking at his first read. Like, that's really hard to even, because at that point, what you're gonna have to do is like stare at your offensive line first, and you may start missing open receivers. We saw that with Jay Cutler after year 2 or 3 with those offensive lines, where he was like making sure he was actually fucking protected, and that led to some really poor things. So I get what you're saying, but at a certain, I don't know, dude, it's tough. There's like give and take with it. Like I don't want him to completely mistrust his offensive line, but I want him to mistrust them a little bit, where if you have to extend a play a little earlier than maybe anticipated, like do that. You know what I mean? It's going to be a balancing act that I hope they can get together, but yeah, it's bad. Really, you brought up Eberflus at the start of this. Yeah. Those 2 challenges were fucking up. I mean, live, we knew what those were. We literally knew what those were live. The catch, all you see is the first foot land with Diggs, and then the rubber from the turf fly up. I was like, oh, that's a good catch. That's a great toe drag. And then Eberflus is challenging it. I was like, what? Did he bobble it? Like, did I miss something? No. And then the same thing with the pick. Now, granted, the camera angle we have, you couldn't see, but that very first instant replay that showed the ball hit I was like, oh, that's not a pick. That sucks. Good play, though. Good try. And he challenges it. What are we doing, dude? That's awful.
And that Kyler Gordon challenge ended up costing them because it cost them the timeout.
Yes.
And it just again, he just has not answered any of the questions, any of the concerns that I have had, that you have had, that Nas has had on this podcast about him as a coach. Like, when he is matched up with a above average coach, just at that line, he just looks outclassed. Like, he just does not match up well. And again, his defense, his scheme, the locker room stuff, all of that is great, but at some point you have to have somebody who's able to give you an edge. And I just don't know what Eberflus gives them an edge in when it comes to playing playoff caliber teams, Super Bowl caliber teams. Like, it's just it's not good. And it was to the point where the broadcast was like, is he challenging this? Like,
well, I don't remember who said it first last year, but we both came to this conclusion. I'm pretty sure independently. He is a really good defensive coordinator. I don't know how good of a head coach he is. And that's, I think by the end of the year, and I hate to, because things may change and it may feel totally different, but I have this feeling that by the end of the year, we're an 8, 9, 10 win team, depending on how things break. Maybe sneak into the playoffs, which is always good for a young quarterback, but at the end of the year, we're saying the same things. What does he provide us as a full team? But it's like, then it's also, well, he was hired for the defense, and I have no worries about them at all. So if you're Ryan Poles, do you make the tough decision and say, this is sort of what I hired him for, but we need something extra? I mean, it's just going to be one of those things, dude. I almost feel like it's setting up analogous to, is it Matt Nagy's fault or is it Mitch's fault? Who's really at fault here? But in a different thing. It's like, is he just a good coordinator and something else there? Or is it something else? Like, it's just, there's always going to be this weird thing with him until he proves otherwise. And through 2 games, we haven't seen it because the defense is balling. But again, we said this last year. He's a good defensive coordinator, especially like that's when we came to the conclusion. I remember now when they fired the DC, Alan Williams, and he took over play calling and he started drawing up blitzes, and you're like, oh shit, this is it. This is the Flus we signed up for right here, because this is what we needed on the defensive side of the ball. And that was when we came where we're like, okay, he's just a defensive coordinator until proven otherwise. And he just hasn't proved otherwise. So yeah, I don't know at this point. I feel weird because I don't want to root against them like we were last year, or in other years to get better draft picks and whatnot. But I also want like a Ben Johnson type next year. Like I want an offensive mind that puts us over the top.
I want Clinton Kubiak, the guy.
I mean, yeah, give me someone that is going to put a serviceable offense. Because at the end of the day, we're contextualizing things, and some people may take it as excuses for whether it's Caleb or the offense or Waldron or just whatever. But when it's all said and done, the one thing that is unacceptable, regardless of context, is the way this offense looked with all this talent. I know the offensive line is bad, but there have been Joe Burrow's first 2 years, their offensive line was fucking putrid, and they made a Super Bowl. Like, figure it the fuck out. There's too much talent on this side of the ball for it to look like this. And if you have to splice up blame, it's probably like 60% offensive line, and then 20% Caleb and 20% Waldron. They're all at fault to a degree, but figure it the fuck out. If that means Caleb has to turn into Superman and become the player we think he's going to be in a year or two, a little bit earlier, then fucking do it. If it means that Shane Waldron has to, tidy some things up, do it. If that means the O-line has to make changes and for them to figure it out, something has to give because they're too talented.
And that brings, I think, the conversation full circle, because I opened the podcast talking about how you can win, you could potentially get to a Super Bowl with this type of defense.
Yep.
But if you want more, if you want to be a sustained winner, if you want to every year in, year out, be a contender to go to the playoffs, go to Super Bowls, beat the Packers, beat the Lions, beat the Vikings, all of that, you have to have a good quarterback. You have to have a great quarterback to do those things. And listen, I would love to win the Super Bowl this year. If they can do that with this defense, great. But if they don't develop Caleb, it just feels like a wasted opportunity again. And I just, Eberflus, is he a player development guy? And that's my biggest concern, because like I would say Gervon Dexter is by far the biggest success so far, and it's only 2 games in to the season.
Yep. Well, Sanborn, like, I would chalk up Sanborn in that conversation.
He doesn't get enough love.
Maybe Kyler Gordon. I mean, but again, this is all defense. This is all the defensive side of football.
I was using it from the context of offense, but like we kind of skipped it with play calling and my annoyedness with Waldron. Like, goddamn, like, do we have to? It just feels like years previous where we're using guys where it's like, why is DeAndre Carter getting so many targets here? Why is Gerald Everett getting so many targets here?
No, I know.
Like it's Jackie, just, it goes back to that. So
I get it. I will say one grander thing that we will know very soon is, because the one thing you touched on, and this is almost like my closing statement, I guess. One thing you touched on was the one thing that the big positive that Poles and everyone in the locker room the last few years have touched on, just how good of a culture setter that Eberflus is, and something that can't be taken away. But what I heard a lot after the game was a lot of hinting that we're blaming the coaches here. They asked Tev, what's going on with the breakdowns? We can only do what the coach calls. They asked DJ Moore, I saw the frustration. We need to execute better, but we're only, running the plays that the coach is calling. I don't think that was necessarily just at Shane Waldron, but it's a lot of like frustration. And because listen, just like the fans, the players heard about Caleb, and there wasn't supposed to necessarily be that big of a curve when it came to him. He was supposed to come right in and plug and play and be better. And I think they heard a lot of that and maybe got a little impatient, and maybe things subside with that as he plays better. But all that said, my worry is this thing can come crashing down on Eberflus, because when you lose a guy, and it's not that Justin ever set the world on fire passing or anything, but we talked about culture. He was a big part of that culture. And you take him from that, and here's this new guy. And it's not to say, I don't think it's divisive at all. I don't think anyone in that locker room is like, man, we really miss Justin. But I'm just saying, just that sort of blow to a culture. It's a new quarterback. It's a new engine to the thing. It's getting tested early, and we're going to see how much of a command that Eberflus has on this team and on this locker room. And listen, would it shock me next week if they come out with their hair on fire? Because Eberflus does have that sort of that feel for the locker room and that pulse on the team. No, but would it also shock me if they just get fucking punched in the mouth and don't respond to it because of things like that? Like, I feel like it can go either way here. Yeah,
I would feel a lot worse. I think I would buy into that whole, like, DJ just wanting Justin back, all that stuff. If it hadn't been for that sideline scuffle, where Caleb took a question, I think it was a legal hit, but it was, I think definitely harder than necessary. Like, he was clearly going out. And I mean, the way that entire offensive line rallied, how many times when Justin was here were we like, where's the offensive line?
Like, get kicked out of a fucking game for the guy. Yeah.
Right. Besides Tevin Jenkins, he was always ready to go. But so I think that moment, was it was nice to see. Like clearly it's not just, they hate Caleb, they don't want to play with Caleb. I think it's just you're right. I think there is some frustrations because this offense, they want to be good. Like, DJ Moore has played with some really bad quarterbacks, and the moment he gets average to good, I guess, for Justin, like he puts up career numbers. So it's like, I think he wants this thing to work more than anybody. So it is frustrating. I'm sure it's frustrating for all involved, and things. It's 2 games in. They're 1-1. They're playing a Colts team who just lost to a 1950 style run game where Josh Jacobs gets the ball 32 times. This is a perfect opportunity. And the Colts are still good. They do have some talent. Let's not get it twisted. But this is a perfect opportunity to get things right, because that defense, they don't have DeForest Buckner. He's most likely going to miss the game due to an ankle injury. The Colts do not have a D line like the Titans or the Texans do. It's in another another dome. Like this is a perfect opportunity to get things right. And I heard on the broadcast where they said, "Oh man, the Bears are really missing Keenan Allen," and I was like,
that was a weird, yeah.
"What?
The,
What are you talking
one
about?"
receiver down had nothing to do.
Let's get Rome more involved though.
Agreed.
Let's get him much and on some easy completions too. That's what I want. I want some easy completions. I know people are saying he should have come down with that touchdown catch.
He should have.
It being the number 9 draft pick, I think I agree, but it is also a tough ball. Like let's just get him some ones that he just is going to catch. Let's just make it a little bit easier for him.
I get it.
Get him involved.
The way Malik Neighbors played, I know he dropped that easy ball at the end of the game.
Listen, we were the ones calling for a trade up for Neighbors.
Oh, trade up or a trade back. Xavier Worthy.
No,
I was pounding the table for him. He's looking pretty fucking good. Not that I don't want Rome though. Again, I like Rome. I do. But again, you're top 10 pick. You make that play.
Yeah. Yeah, help your quarterback out a little.
That was going to be a point that I was going to make, but I don't want to see. I don't want to like go out. The one I guess constant that I'll continue to look for is, because there were people even then. Oh, the ball placement on it was. I get it. It wasn't a perfect ball, but it hit both of his hands. I'm sick and fucking tired of us having to be in these situations where a quarterback has to be 100% perfect to make things happen. Patrick Mahomes doesn't put it on the money every single fucking time. No quarterback does. I for years I saw Patrick Mahomes underthrow Tyreek Hill, but plays were still fucking made. I need this whole offense to make plays, Caleb included. I need there to be play. It's just there. But I guess super last point. My biggest takeaway with the defense is they're good. This isn't a we lose to good quarterbacks or we get torched by good. This is, I don't know if it's on the level of 2018, but CJ Stroud had his struggles, and this defense is gonna swallow Anthony Richardson alive. We're gonna see how we do with a little bit more of a mobile quarterback, but the same thing they did to Levis, I think they're gonna do to Richardson. This defense is gonna not only keep them in, they may score some points. I need the offense to do something.
Yeah, you're going to have your opportunities to take the ball away from Anthony Richardson. He surprisingly did not run all that much against the Packers, and I think that's coaching. That's by design to keep him a little, keep him healthy throughout the season, make it longer than 4 games. You're going to have your opportunities. Jonathan Taylor fumbled. Anthony Richardson threw some really bad interceptions. Like, you're going to have your opportunities to take the ball away, and I think that the defense, if they could cut the field in half a little bit, listen, I heard Lance Briggs and Alex Brown talking about it on the CHGO Bears podcast, which is incredible that they have those two over there now. They basically said, I don't care. We didn't care that the offense wasn't playing well. Like, we just cared about doing our best. And anybody who's like, oh, the defense, they're playing this well, who's to say, just keep playing well.
It's also not a thing. It's just, that's not a thing at all.
If they're good, they're good.
Exactly.
Like you just said. So I think it's a good opportunity. As Bears fans, let's give it a couple more weeks. I know it's frustrating. I know we're excited. This offense is too talented to continue playing at this rate. And we did see improvement. I don't think there's any argument from one. I mean, it couldn't have been any worse, like you said at the beginning.
Like, if this was week 1, I think there wouldn't be any like red button pressing. If this was what happened in week 1, and then we were looking towards next week as week 2, it'd be like, okay, rookie quarterback made a couple mistakes, threw into triple coverage. Overall, there were some positives, but coming off of week 1, I think we were expecting a bigger bounce back than what it was.
Yeah. So let's see what happens this week. We'll continue covering it for you. I had fun. It was a frustrating game.
It was,
but they were in it, dude. They lost by 6 to a team that we expected them to lose to on Sunday Night Football on the road. Caleb Williams' second start with the Bears. Offensive line was horrible. It probably can't get any worse than that. So let's hope that they pick it up. Let's hope some changes are genuinely made. I feel good about week 3. I think this is a good opportunity to assert themselves on offense, and I think we're going to see a much, much, much better product on Sunday at noon against the Colts.
For sure. All right, Jackie. I would like, if we can get in an episode this week, sort of previewing that. I'd love to. Obviously, if not, it is what it is. But yeah, because I feel, there's some things I want to see, and I want to reiterate that on the episode.
You want to see Velas back in. I get it. I
Jesus
get it.
fuck.
I know.
No,
you
I
were
don't.
having...
Leave that man on the bench. Leave him where he lies.
No, we do appreciate you all for listening to the Bear With Us podcast. I'm Jack. He's Frank. We love doing this. We're going to continue doing it. Hopefully, we'll be talking about a Bears win next week against the Colts. Until then, Frankie, I'll talk to you later.
Later, Jackie. Later, everybody.